What's up again, everybody? Well, we are on the cusp of ProQuest Season 3, Week 3. It's the final week, and so that means we have none other than Mr. Br33zy himself, Parker, over there. Hey, Parker, how's it going?
Hi, which way are you? Hi,
There we
there you
go.
are.
Nailed it. Parker wrote the article for breaking down the meta each week, and Week 2 is due to go live like right now at some point while we're recording this. Literally, he's watching his phone just to see if it actually goes live. But we're going to break down the data because LSS said we could in video form, and so we're going to do that. By the way, I have to mention this. I told you I would. It's really fantastic that the two of us live about 20 minutes from each other. So of course we decided to call each other on Discord and have this conversation over the internet because that's where we stand right now.
Yeah.
We literally could be in the same room having this conversation, but here we are, both being fab dads and, recording in the wee hours of the evening.
Yeah, we gotta wait till everyone else is tucked away before our friendship can really unfurl.
That's correct. That's the way to break it down. So speaking of breaking it down, let's break down some of this data. Do you want to walk us through kind of how you've looked at this and processed it over the past couple of days so that you can write this article, and then I can kind of give you my first impressions, if you will, because I built this from the picture you gave me, and so I looked at it a little bit, and I looked at a couple of interesting data points, but I think you've had it for far longer.
Yeah, like 3.5 days longer than you. So there's a little bit, I've simmered on it for quite a while. It's boiling.
For sure.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, the first thing I do as a casually competitive player, I'll say the first thing I do is literally just open the file and go to wins and just see who won, because I just greedily want to be like, ooh, what's going on? So I think that, as a player, that's probably what most people want to know anyway. And so, yeah, I mean, looking at the players and starting left and working right, this is how they give it to me, and it's really good. I mean, just the format linearly breaks down everything. So they don't tell me how many ProQuests this data was taken from. They don't tell me how many countries it was taken from. So I actually proactively ask those questions. It helps wrap my mind around like the vastness of all of this. Like how much of this, they don't tell me like, 86 were in, Asia Pacific, and, 56 were in Australia. They just give me the point blank number. And so kind of have to use your imagination and keep up with like the trends of where this information is coming from. But
the thing that I was thinking about, and I kind of agree with you, so I'm just going to do spreadsheet things. This is literally a spreadsheet video. Congratulations, everyone. We duped you into a spreadsheet video. Google Sheets for the win. So you said sorting by, or just thinking about players and moving linearly over is cool, and I like that too. So if you look at the breakdown overall for number of players across this event, by the way, there were recorded 2,816 players recorded at these ProQuests, or at least the data that was given to LSS, of course, from participating ProQuest stores. And of that, 450 players chose to play Phi Rising Rebellion. And then I think 288 being on Oldhim. And then the other one that everyone's kind of looking out for is Icelander, 279. Do any of those other numbers stick out, or specifically those three? Does that seem about right for what you would expect?
Yeah, this is exactly what the trajectory was saying from week one, and even leading into ProQuest. If you just like pay attention to your local metas, everyone's been kind of circling these three and seeing, okay, if I want to play Briar, I'm gonna see Icelander, Oldhim, and Phi. If I want to play Lexi, I'm gonna see Icelander, Phi, and Oldhim. So yeah, these are the three that I've really foresaw being big numbers here. And I will say though too, some of this data, and it's in the article, it's prefaced in the articles, and it will continue to be, not all of this data is 100% of the player base. Some stores, and I don't know why they choose to do this or why they're given the option to do this, will only report top 8 and up. They aren't required to, all 64 players aren't required to be logged and submitted as data. So take some of the, it's more important as you get more into like you mentioned, the percentages of conversions. That's where it gets a little dicey. but yeah, and so there may be some variance in the 2000 whatever number you just said down there.
Sure.
It may vary, because even after they give me this data, they get a few more trickling in of information, and they'll edit my article to reflect true numbers.
That's a very good point. And I think this is that's something that everyone should start with and keep that in mind, is that these are not the end all be all numbers, because I think everything's happening. This is a snapshot of that, whereas you can still get some trickling in and you can still get fixes that are made over time. But if you take this as broad strokes, then you can kind of glean some very interesting points. For example, this one sticks out to me. Dromai sitting at 284 players more than Icelander. Like, even if that number is off by a little bit, the fact that there's that many Dromai players actually represented in this meta, that is the third highest played hero in this meta, is so interesting, with 100 top 8s and 8 total wins. That's an interesting little spike point, right?
Yeah, for sure. I don't know the specific. We could glance back at the article, but yeah, I think Dromai's, in even going into week 3, it's gonna. I foresee it being more than 284. I think we're gonna creep into the 300s as people start to see the viability, and even, spoiler, there was a ban and suspension announcement this week.
Yeah,
as people start to like utilize this strong playing field to start testing the viability of post ProQuest, I could totally see them saying, you know what, I'm gonna see how good Dromai is now, so that I know where she could be post. But yeah, to your point, like, it goes from Phi at 16%, and then 4 heroes share the 10% of the meta.
Yeah, which is super interesting when you look at all 4 of those, and Dash being one of them too, right?
Yeah. Dash is another one, aside from the big 3 that we mentioned, was always a contender. She just has the capacity with like Teklo Foundry Heart, Teklo Core, to just get a little bit more generation and resource. So as the meta gets colder, resource generation becomes more valuable, and so I think that's a good like segue into why we're starting to see a little bit more of that. And same with Dromai, she's got Furnace. She's got a little bit of an out when it comes to resource gen. So it's starting to mold together a little bit. There's the ice, and then there's the resource generating heroes. So
yeah. So one of the things that I looked at after kind of seeing this overall picture was obviously looking linearly, like you mentioned, looking at the next category, which is top 8s, and looking at how many heroes top 8'd in what respect and in what order. And when you sort it like this, look who you see at the top. Wouldn't you know it? It's everyone's 3 favorite heroes. Phi, Oldhim, Icelander, all back to back to back in the top 8s.
Yep. It's interesting, dude, because like when I go into these, I don't want to write, here's the meta. I want there to be a realm of exploration for players to still have hope in. And the data still shows that, but if you were to look at this outside of knowledge of this game and just took this to like an analytical person and they'd studied the patterns, they'd say, well, if you're telling me what a meta is, I don't know what that is, because I don't know what games are. If you're telling me what a meta is, I would say this is your meta, because this is the pattern. Here's your higher statistics, here's your higher conversion rates, here's your, but there's just such a viability in other heroes that it's hard to just like put the stamp on it and say, there's your meta, boys and girls. That's what it is. But the data, it's hard to deny. So
the data shows that those 3 heroes are sort of the top 3 in the meta. But look at the drop off. There's not a ton of drop off from top 8s from a top 8 perspective when you drop to Dromai, right? Dromai sitting at 100 top 8s. And then we'll talk about conversion, of course, in a little bit. But like, dropping off only 23 players, and then there's another little drop off, 16 players down to Dash, which we saw is, again, these are large contingents of played heroes. But then like once you get to this point, it drops off by a few players each as you go down, which speaks heavily to the idea that if you want to pick a hero and you're really good on that hero, you actually have a really good shot to just get into top 8s, which is really interesting. It speaks a little bit to it being open. Even though we know that these 3 names right here are on the top, like there's a little drop off, but you can still kind of cut your way in when it comes to converting from the field to top 8 if you're good on that hero. So it speaks to what you talked about in an article for that week 1, right?
Yeah, and I guess I personally, this is my personal take on it. I don't foresee, in the next week, one of the sub or anywhere from Dromai down. Well, I'll say from Dash down. I don't see Reinhardt taking a 180 and just going like, oh, he's actually top 2 now. Like I just like,
right.
So it is a very open and diverse. So to your point, yeah, like practice and dedication to the hero is proving that it's not just like, well, I love Reinhardt and I'm super good at him, but I can't even bring myself to play him. Like, no, you could, and you could actually get yourself like at least a nice shiny pack of Soraya sleeves.
Yeah, you got that going for you, right? Like you get to the top 8, you've carved yourself a path, and oftentimes we see that these ProQuests are, hovering in the like 32 up to 40, 50 players, like that kind of range for a lot of the ProQuests that I've seen results for, which is anecdotal, of course, but like that's cutting into the top 8 in a like 50-person ProQuest is no small feat, and anyone that thinks otherwise should try it because you may not cut into the top 8 of a 50-person ProQuest. So the real final point that we should do, and this is the one that perhaps has the most bearing on like overall kind of playability, is the percentage of wins versus the field. And that one speaks to overall strength. And this is where we really want to be looking at from a competitive standpoint, because what this is calculating, as you can see, is calculating the number of wins versus all, and I have to scroll down, versus all of the wins that were taken by every hero this week. So these columns right here, even though they sit in the sort of the center, these, as far as like power level are concerned, these are the ones that kind of really show you the power level. All these conversions are just funny to talk about because they represent the numbers versus themselves, but this is really where you get your meat and potatoes. And when we sort like this, we do see that Oldhim has 21% of the wins for ProQuests that were played in week 2, with 28 total wins. And then you follow that by Fi, and then you drop down to Icelander for those big 3 overall, which is quite interesting. But then I do want to point this out. The 4th place, if you will, with percentage of wins was Dash. So even though the large number of players that played it, comparatively to some of these other heroes, they are managing to close out and get some wins, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Dash is very, very good. Like as point blank as I could say it, she's very good at managing, from a hero perspective, managing tempo and being able to pivot, and has can bring a totally different sideboard package in depending on the hero. Control versus boost. If you were going to go into a Fatigue Oldhim that is your local player, that's always Fatigue Oldhim, you're probably bringing 80 cards in the deck, or 76 cards or whatever it is. So yeah, there's a lot of flexibility with Dash, and it shows here in this specific column.
I also like the fact that Reinhardt, Dromai, both at 6% of the wins taken. Briar, Bravo, both at 5%. And then Lexi, interestingly enough, and Dorinthia. And these are reductions. Like overall, we're rounding up, we're rounding down overall, but these do represent some very close percentage points overall for all of these heroes. So they all represent a little bit of playability as far as once you get to the overall like top 8 trying to win. If you can manage to pick up a win, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, one hero that I like suspected or I had my eye on was Azalea. She's got so much disruption and so much of a cult following that the people who play her are very dedicated and practiced. So it was really cool to see 3 top 8s. It'd be interesting to see how that picks up, because if you don't look at these numbers, you hear Azalea everywhere. Everyone's talking about her, but then you see like, oh well, only 49 of you showed up, where the rest of you? Come on, put in some work.
The money where your mouth is. You got to put your money where your mouth is. Everyone needs to show their Azalea Cult card. That's the problem. You got to represent that at the door. Okay, so before I do that, press random button on keyboard. For the final thing, I think this is the most important takeaway if you are a player that just wants to go to your last ProQuest and pick a hero and do well with that hero. I think the biggest data point you should look at is percentage of top 8s, because this represents, and let me sort it by the percentage of top 8s. It is column F. Yay, spreadsheet day. Okay, so percentage of top 8s. So if you want to pick a hero and your goal is to try and get to a top 8, this column and this data point literally represents all of the heroes that got top 8 compared to the field. Looking at that data point, this tells you what heroes can get you there and basically how close or far apart they are within that top 8 bracket. And I would say that if you are a player that wants to get to a top 8 in this last opportunity last week, then these heroes right here are going to do well for you. But it doesn't drop off very far for Dromai. Dromai perhaps has a really good shot in this meta because 10% of the top 8 field ends up being Dromai. 8% ends up being Dash. 8% ends up being Bravo. 7 for Dorinthia. 6 for Briar. I mean, and these are all very close as it kind of comes down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And this is the last week of certain cards existing in certain decks as well. So, take that all into consideration, and to really piggyback on the point, know your meta. Like, know your local meta. That will also help to identify, if you know who you're playing against, maybe some of these numbers might not directly affect your very localized bubble. But from going in blind, you're right. Looking at this column, this will guide you in the right direction for sure.
So hopefully someone got some entertainment or some insight. If you enjoyed this video, if you enjoyed our little breakdown, leave a comment down below telling us what you got from all this data, or tell us something else we can analyze from this data, something else we can break down, like overall players to the percentage of top 8s. Like maybe we can generate that as well, which is technically generated. There's some interesting other stuff that we can do with this data. Let us know in a comment below what you would like to break down, and maybe we can do that on like a stream or something. Or we could just do that as a recap next week after all the data is collected. Br33zy, what do you think?
I think we should aggregate everything and do a full recap. That'd be super dope.
If you enjoy this video, make a number go slightly higher. Look, we're 4 numbers away, Br33zy. Isn't that's so close?
Oh yeah, hold on.
That
let me
other
sub.
number.
I need a sub real quick.
You jerk. You would never.
I'm
never.
kidding.
Get out of here. As always, thanks for watching.